Peace to the tribe. Peace to the tribes. We're going to be starting off with a read from the Venetian Discovery of America, Geographic Imagination and Print Culture in the Age of Encounters by Elizabeth Horodorich. Elizabeth Horodorich, all right? This is the Venetian Discovery of America. We're going to be starting out from this book right here. So let's get to it. Peace to the loved ones. Now we diving straight into a belly flop. So act like you already know, even if you really don't. You know, we getting it for the first time, all right? Not for the first time, but we're going to get it like it's the first time. It says, while the historians of cartography have suggested a variety of origins for the term Anian or Amu, as well as myriad theories behind its appearance in mid-century maps, Gastaldi most certainly derived Anian from Ramusio's 1559 edition of Marco Polo's Travels. In Ramusio's section on the Gulf of Chainan, his edition of Polo recounted that a large gulf existed in northeastern China. Alright, it says, leaving the port of Zaitum, modern Guangzhou, one sails westward and a bit southwest for 1,500 miles, passing through a gulf named Chainan, roughly the modern South China Sea, which takes 2 months to travel across, navigating towards the north. The entire gulf is bounded on the southeast side by the province of Manzi, and on the other side by Anian and Taloman, besides many other provinces. This gulf is very large, and so many people live there that it seems almost like another world. Alright, peace to the real ones. You should already know by now. If not, you know, go back and get part 1. We are in the build right now. Peace to the real ones. This passage about Anian, which describes the geographic relationship between Asia and America, was significantly absent from all other previous editions of Polo's text. Looking to the south along the Chinese coast, Ramusio's Polo describes the mainland province of Manzi ahead of him to his right, and Anian and Tolman distantly behind him to his left, or otherwise in the northwest corner of the American continent, just as Gastaldi's maps illustrate. And we kind of touched on the map back in part 1. So you can go back to part 1 and get that drop, alright? It says Ramusios encouraged Gastaldi to understand that Anian was on the other side of this large gulf in another world, or in other worlds, potentially in a new world in America. Now, it's pretty intense to me that they're highlighting on the other side, right? Because this is what literally caught my attention when I started building on this Anian the first time around. And it took me on a journey that I'm still surfing to this day. This has been a couple of years in the making. Alright, you're looking at a drop potentially taking a couple years, if not 3, to produce once again. Alright. Says, in addition to depicting the Strait of Anian, all 3 of these wall maps prominently place the Asian provinces of Tolman or Toloman or Tolman and Agama or Agaman in what is today the northwestern part of the American continent. And over time, Anian also became a kingdom or a province in North America. Alright, let's get that back. It says, in addition to depicting the Strait of Anian, all three of these wall maps prominently place the Asian provinces of Tolman or Toloman or Tolman and Agama or Angaman in what is today the northwestern part of the American continent. And over time, Anian also became a kingdom or province in North America. When he had been sent to travel west by the Great Khan, Polo visited Toluman on his return voyage after passing through Tibet, reporting that it was near India. Alright, so this is, India superior, right? We are more than comfortable with this term right about now. And I remember when I first ran into this drop on my own, it was, man, you know what I mean? We talking mind blasting. And it still feels the same nonetheless. We're focusing on the Great Khan, right? We're going to be really building out of this aspect right here. And we're also going to be building on the fact that Anian became a kingdom in North America. Now, this is the fifth wave, and I hope by understanding or understanding that this is the fifth wave, you are definitely dodging your own hijacks by now. Even with these words and terms they're constantly using. Also, I want you to keep in mind how they emphasize on the other side relating to Anian. Alright, on the other side. So, I hope you're good. We're going to continue to build from here on. We were just checking out a little quick drop in this book real quick, and we're building on Anian right about now. We're talking about India superior. We're talking about the Great Khan. And we're trying to figure out what this kingdom or province of North America really is. So I hope you're ready to get comfortable. You know what I'm saying? Peace, peace. We're going to get back to it. Peace and Ahab to all the loved ones. I just want to say, we will be shipping out crystals to all those who have placed their orders, Ahab. And, just appreciate your patience. There's been a lot going on. It's been a lot, but for those that have been patient and those that have continued to buy, Ahab from the Harbone, really appreciate it. We'll be getting those out, for sure. And, sorry for the ones I wasn't able to send out to those that were able to participate. But those matters are getting resolved right about now. And hopefully soon we'll be able to, pick up where we left off. Also, a lot of people are, trying to dig on the Patreon. There's a lot going on with that as well, I don't know what it is right now. We got a lot going on as far as who's surfing the wave, and they're starting to track the traffic, and, they're hitting me up with fees that's just, it's outrageous right now, so, for everyone that's really trying to catch these drops on the Patreon, much ado for the support. I'll be leaving the Cash App link in the description box, and for those that would like to, just pitch in for that to continue the process, we use Vimeo as the uploader on that, through Patreon to keep the rules of YouTube, offline. And, they got different price ranges according to the way those packages go and, how much you use for data. per month or so. So, you know, for all those who are really, really interested in getting that going, we'll leave that link in the description box just to get it jump started and to get everything back on track. You know, as we do, you know, the multitasking for the real ones. Continuing this build though, you know, we were just getting out of that book that Anian was a kingdom or province of North America. And here is this book we'll also be building out of for a little bit, called The Lost Kingdom of Anian Regnum. Alright, and this just brought me back to when the bro was first surfing on it. I'm just highlighting a couple of things. Of course, you know, a lot of it has already been mentioned. You know what I'm saying? But, you know, we're digging on the fact that they're talking about this Anian being the kingdom and so forth, right? They want to say it's a myth, but they're still trying to figure out if it ever existed. So, as we get into this next link, we're just going to dig on a little bit, because at the end of the day, we only talk about your Prester, right? And we're talking about India Superior. And this is where, you know, things really tend to get interesting, especially for those connecting the European flow, those of the European royalty and the indigenous, or aboriginals, I'll say, cultures as far as how they actually dealt with one another. Also, you know, the Moro War and why we even refer to, you know, such moments, it kind of touches into all of that. Alright, it's a very interesting way to surf once you see it in real time, right in your face bone. So we're gonna go ahead and get to it. Hey, hard for the loved ones. Peace. Alright, so this is that book that we was talking about. Alright, The Lost Kingdom of Anian. And we're gonna dig around it a little bit, see just what it is that we got. Alright, so here they are talking about how this was a kingdom of Anian. Alright, and those who came hunting for gold after them knew of it. But the knowledge of this lost kingdom is now completely disregarded and ridiculed as mythological, if not completely forgotten by mainstream historians. Alright, this lost kingdom. You know, so they say that it is possible that the lost civilization of Anian did exist. Alright. Similar to other mysteries and lost places in our past like Atlantis, El Dorado, and Camelot. Alright. Or Troy. So we're just digging on this Anian. We're gonna see what else we got. Peace, peace. Alright, so here we're building on the origin of the name for Anian. Alright, and here we have at the top, Anian is a Welsh word with roots into the Celtic, meaning nature, temperament, and power. Anian is a Welsh word with roots into the Celtic, meaning nature, temperament, and power. You know, this right here automatically stood out to me, right? Regnum is a Latin word meaning kingdom or dominion. Kingdom or dominion, with root meanings of the biological kingdom as opposed to a ruling kingdom. So with biological kingdom, we're talking about genetics and roots of the sort, right? Regnum, I'm thinking trees, I'm thinking cedars, I'm thinking solid crystallized trees. Especially since Anian is referring back to nature. So I'm thinking of the natural kingdom of trees. India Superior. Right? Your natural kingdom of trees, man. From this breakdown, alright? Of trees. We talking nature. And it was in your trees that you had your powwow. Alright, you had your powwow. Now, this is not a coincidence, I don't believe. Because as I started doing this build and digging, I came across so much, right? Which is why we have a part 2 and why it kind of took about 2 years to develop it. Here we have the derivation of the word Anian is obscure, but it seems to have to come from some name given to the extreme northeast part of Asia, and this name has been vaguely ascribed to Marco Polo in the years 1254 through 1324, that the title first appeared on the Asiatic side of the strait, though it afterwards settled on the other, is almost certain, for it is hardly credible that a map maker will put an entire imaginary name to an entirely unknown part of a new continent. And if Asiatic, the name being applied to the northeast part of the Chinese Empire, will almost inevitably be taken from Marco Polo. But the word Anian is nowhere mentioned by the Venetian. How then did this Anian Regnum, Anian Provincia, come to make its appearance on maps? Samuel Purchas, an English cleric who lived from 1577 through 1626, gives Anian as an island off the Chinese coast, probably a corruption of Hainan or Hainan, and Polo mentions a province of Anian, variously read in some editions as Amu or Anui, and placed by Colonel Henry Yule, a Scottish Orientalist and a geographer who lived from 1820 through 1889 in Yunnan. This then moved far north by some map makers may account for Anian province. But what is Anian Regnum? How were geographers able to settle the political organization of this unexplored land? In Marco Polo's travels, an account is given of a prince named Nayan or Nayan, a relative, Nayan, a relative of Kublai Khan, who made war on the Khan and was captured and put to death after one of Marco's stock battles. Alright? So I remember Drop way back was asking, like, what is this? You know what I'm saying? what is this Regnum? And I just remember the bro building. He was seriously building. So the fact that we're talking about the natural kingdom of trees, right? As Anian is a Celtic word dealing with nature, and it is a kingdom. It is a kingdom. Alright, with root meanings of the biological kingdom as opposed to a ruling kingdom. Because I know people get thrown off when we talk about priests, king, and khans, right? They like, this is America. we aren't ruled by kings, even though we had chiefs. And then people automatically think of it different. When you say chief, it's like king goes out the window. You know what I'm saying? So, you can pick and choose to be funny with your interpretations, but it's all the same. Alright? It's all the same. Peace, peace. So basically, this book was breaking down how this so-called lost kingdom of Anian Regnum to be exact, right, was actually mentioned and have an oral tradition in the First Nations of the British Columbia. All right. And I guess, the First Nations have a tale where, they knew about this, all right? About this Anian. All right? And that's give or take. We already know there is no time. We're just talking Hua. You also have the Wei Shan's narrative, right, of China, where they said that supposedly they were able to come over here to this Anian and they saw a strange kingdom of women whose inhabitants were half human and breastless. I don't know about this. I never really heard that, but it's just interesting to keep in mind, especially as this build develops. We're also talking about the Spanish explorers 1,000 years later begin searching for the 7 cities of gold and a race of 3-breasted women because of it. I don't know about the hijack, alright? But nonetheless, we're still talking about a kingdom. Alright? A kingdom. And we're going to continue to surf the wave. That's pretty much it out of this book. We're going to move on to the next one. But I do want you to keep in mind, these different terms as we continue to build. Alright? And again, we're just talking Anian at the moment, and how Anian is what they're referring to as a lost kingdom. Also keep in mind that we've been talking about this great Khan, right? This great Khan. This great Khan is the one sitting, right? And he has the interest in this Anian Regnum, according to Marco Polo. Alright. And here you see the Cathay, just like the bros always talking about, because we're just building on India Superior. And you already know who the great Khan is, right? Because it's a great connection. Alright. Keep in mind, we're just dealing with the kingdom of trees. Alright. So we're going to move on to the next one. Peace, peace. Alright, so here we have the Americas revealed. And we have the Cholahuma, or the Colahuma, Little Tennessee River Valley. Alright, Little Tennessee River Valley. Now it's crazy how this drop definitely connects with the Levitical drop for me. If you go back and get this series, along with part 1, of course, but this, really connects with the Levitical cities. Alright. The secret history of the Caskanopo people. Caskanopo people, alright? The forgotten peoples of the Southern Heights, alright? It says few, if any, readers are probably familiar with the ethnic name Casquinam, I don't know, right? Or Cascanabo, or Cascanampo, but they are recorded in the French and early South Carolina colonial archives as the most powerful tribe in what is now eastern Tennessee. That is, until after 1708. Their name disappears from the maps other than a river's name after that time. Alright, and if you've been digging on that Levitical cities, you know that, I personally got some, roots of my own right there in that Tennessee town, right? And that's where I was able to get my, what we refer to in layman term as Cherokee, but also in reference to the Anian, alright? We're just talking Chickamauga flow. Alright, says the Cascanampo was not mentioned in the Hernando de Soto or Juan Padro or Pardro chronicles, even though both expeditions passed through the region, where the name later appears on maps. Its first appearance is on the 1684 map of North America by Jean-Baptiste Franklin. I will go ahead and tell you that it is a combination of two Coasati words that mean warriors many. Nampu means how many, and Alabamu, which is where Alabama comes from. Alright. The reason that I use the virtual reality image for the Cholahuma at the top was that I suspect that the area around the Cholahuma on the Little Tennessee River is where the Coasati language originated. Cholahuma was an Alabama town within the Itza Maya Asate Creek speaking province of Chiaha. Alright. The Coasati language is a mixture of Itza Maya, Asate Creek, and Alabama. And Alabama itself is a Choite Maya word. Alright. So we're building back on this Itza Maya Asate Creek connection. Alright. And we're gonna dig on this seriously in this one, like in real time. Okay, but before we get into this, I want you to pay attention to the fact that we're now talking about a province. Alright, we're talking about a province, just like how we was building on, oh my bad, wrong one. Alright, a kingdom or province in North America, and this Anian drop. Alright, but we're not digging on that same thing per se, so this is a connection. Alright, you're gonna see how this all ties together. It says, when mentioned at all in the academic literature today, Caskanopo is usually found in academic papers or books by professors in Eastern Tennessee or in Cherokee history. And this becomes a lot of part of the riffraff when it comes to Cherokee, because a lot of things are just lumped into it. And there's a reason why. We won't necessarily touch on it today in full, but we'll get to it. But there was a lot absorbed by the Cherokee, You know, and there's great reason, especially when we're talking about later what will become referred to as the $5 Indians. All right. So, you can see that, you know, this Caskanopo was absorbed into Cherokee history. Both the professors and the Cherokee files state that the Caskanopo was the name of the late 17th century French explorers used for the Cherokee. The authors used this statement to explain the lack of a word similar to Cherokee on any map of southeastern North America until 1715. They go on to say that the Chaloque was the Spanish word for Cherokee. And I mean, that goes for good reason, because, you know, Cherokee is a foreign frequency. All right. I mean, even the spelling wouldn't even be Cherokee, which gives credence to other theories to surf the wave with this Cherokee flow. And, you know, I know the things that are attached to it, but I'm not necessarily, you know, afraid of those muddy waters, because I've done, you know, the genealogy, and everything's proven to be Levitical. But, you know, these things do come into mind, especially when we're dealing with such drops, when we're surfing the wave in such a manner. All right, the Chalog, or the Chiliki, or the Chalaque, as mentioned by chroniclers of the DeSoto expedition, is not a name for the Cherokee. Later maps placed them in southeast Georgia and then on the Chattahoochee River as members of the Creek Federation. All right, now, I know what, you know, the bro would say right about now, you know, and we're going to get into that because this is a tribal discussion, as we'll see. But I ran into some ooh-wee. I really ran into some ooh-wee. So I hope everyone's getting comfy. You know what I'm saying? If you want to go get your popcorn, literally now is the time to do it, because we're on the Magic Ether bus. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to the tribe, to the Ether squad. You know what I'm saying? Hey, ha to the Ether squad. We on the Ether bus, and it's gonna get really cozy. All right. It says their name. It says Ethers. Now you can't you can't make this up. It's supposed to say either, but it literally says Ether. Alright, it literally says Ether. Man, Ether squad. You can't make this up. It literally says Ether. Alright, it says their name is Ether. Derived from the Teutonic Itza Maya or Asate Creek word for primitive barbarians. Alright. And they're talking about the so-called Cherokee. Alright. Over the years, I have found several statements in academic papers and internet blogs equating the Caskanopo with Cherokee. Most give no source for this statement, but if they did, they just wrote. I don't know. Hannah appears to have been a professor somewhere, but I can't find out much more about him or her. However, recently in a professional archaeologist blog, I found actual quotes from Dr. Hannah. In WordPress, it is not possible now to apply a red color to a specific word for a sentence within a paragraph, so I have instead put a number to flag sentences which are cacadatoro, which is basically the entire paragraph. Here's the quote. We look at Franklin's 1684 map of North America. Between the upper forks of the Caskanopo are located 3 Cherokee villages bearing the names Shalaka, Katogui, or Katowagi, okay, was the Shawnee name for the Cherokees, and the Teligui, the last name being identical in sound with the Talagui of the Lenape tradition as given by Heckwelder of the Isles maps. The Tennessee River is called Riveres of the whatever that would be, right? The Caskanopo, the Caskanopo probably comes from the Casqui or the Casquin Indians referred to by some of the chroniclers by the Soto's expedition. So they attached them to the Cherokees because maybe the Cherokees weren't called the Cherokees at that time. In the sense that we know of it, right? They were, developing that frequency. It says, Gatchet writes, Tukabachi, a town of the Upper Creeks on the Tallapoosa River, 1.5 miles below its falls, whose original inhabitants were of an alien tribe, afterwards amalgamated with the Creeks. Now keep this in mind, right? Were of an alien tribe. Keep this in mind. The Upper Creeks. Alright? An alien tribe. Afterwards amalgamated with the Creeks. The town anciently was known under two other names. It's Spogi or Italua Ispokogi or Italua Ispokogi, said to mean town of survivors or surviving town, remnant of a town, and Italua Facha Siege or Sige. Milford says that nearly about the same time that the Alabamans were admitted into the Creek Confederacy, an Indian tribe which had just been destroyed by the Iroquois, and the Hurons came to ask protection of the Muskogees, whom I shall now call Creeks. So we're getting this build on these Creeks, and it is for good reason. All right, so let's keep on building with these Creeks. All right. Says the Creeks received them and gave them lands in the center of the nation. They built a town which is at this day of some importance and which is called Tucket Batchet from the name of the tribe. Judge Force, in commenting on this passage, Indians of Ohio suggest that it is within possibility that the Tukau Batchies were a surviving remnant of the Eries. The resemblance of Ispokogi, one of the names of their town, to Kispokogi, the name of one of the Shawnee clans, suggests the probability that the Tucket Batchets were Shawnees. The Italu Etowah town, Ispokogi, and Facha Siege unknown. So this Etowah is definitely in the Levitical cities, which is why I said that this is kind of tying into that. All right. It says Dr. Hanna didn't even look at the maps that he described. Only the last 1718 map that Dr. Lyles ever published even mentioned the Cherokees, and he placed them onto the Holston and Nolichucky rivers, not the Tennessee. The tribal names are Shalaka, Catalu, and Telaqui. The Shalaka was an important Shawnee town that moved to the Tallapoosa River in Alabama to escape the Rico Hawkins slave raids. Now that's interesting because we're talking about where's the Africans, right? And even more when you get to understanding what this spot right here specifically is, it begs to wonder who was enslaving who. Alright? Was it melanated enslaving pale folk? Or is it still the same narrative of supposedly pale folk enslaving melanated folk. I mean, when we're talking about this one right here, but see how we're talking indigenous so-called slave raids, right? Cataloo was a Creek town that moved to the middle, that moved to the middle Chattahoochee River for the same reason. The Appalachee is a Muskogee Creek tribal name, not Cherokee. So you see how they getting tribal, right? This creek is showing some pushback on the Cherokee. It's like, nah, back up, get up off me. This is my frequency. This is my creek frequency. You know, and it goes to show, you'll see, because this is a tribal thing right here, this Creek and Cherokee. All right, we're talking Creek and Cherokee, excuse me. Creek and Cherokee, all right? Just like how we're digging on Anian. All right, and the provinces of the Great Khan, of the kingdom. The lost, forgotten kingdom of Anian. All right, Anian being the nature, the kingdom of nature, your natural kingdom of trees. We're just building on your trees. All right, Anian. All right. So this creek is screaming at this Cherokee like, back up off me. But we in the Chickamauga flow. Hey, how I taught my Chickamaugas. Shalom. As you will see on the maps below, that statement is a lie. No decile map has that statement. Some do say, alright, whatever this would be, Calamaco. Alright, Calamaco. Calamaco is an Itza Maya word that means house of the king or royal place. This false statement is the source of the Caskanopo equaling Cherokee. Now, I can see why the Creek would be mad at the fact that, you know, this is relating back to the Cherokee, because I don't know, man. Maybe this Creek got a little hijack to it. I don't know. I mean, we do say that this is a more on more war. There's some tribal frequency right here with this one. You know what I'm saying? And I'm just running into it the same way we ran into it in part 1. And it's so lovely how we're doing it right now. But, you know, keep in mind we're talking Creek versus Cherokee. All right? Creek versus Cherokee. And we're going to shift from that focus to the Calamaco. Right? Calamaco meaning what? House of the king. House of the king. What king, you may ask, right? We're talking about the Great Khan. The Great Khan that had a kingdom or province in North America. Alright, a kingdom or province. And we were building earlier. Was it right here? Let's see. Province. See? Of Chiaha. So it's all connecting. It's all connecting, right? And this is a beautiful flow. So now that we understand, we're talking about this house of the king, right? Or Great Khan, or the royal place, Calamaco. And Calamaco is tying us in with the Itza Maya. Alright, so now we're tying in the Mayan connection to some of the tribes of the southeastern United States. Alright. It says, as said earlier, Caskanopo is an easily translatable Coasati word. The town of the Caskee in western Tennessee was probably founded by Coasati. That comment by Gatschet referred to Shawnee refugees from the Ohio River Valley who fled Iroquois attacks and joined with the Creeks in eastern Alabama. This statement has nothing to do with Caskanopo or Tuckabatchee. No, Tuckabatchee was inhabited by Muskogee-speaking Creeks from the southern Appalachians. Over and over again, I find ludicrous interpretations by the past gringo anthropology professors who analyze the frontier English spellings of Native American tribes and villages. It never dawns on them to learn the actual phonetics spoken by natives or to buy Native American language dictionary. Alright. So, here we got a little bit of the map drop. Alright, got a little bit of it. Got a little map drop. Alright, and we're just digging on this creek, denouncing its involvement with Cherokee and so forth and so forth. We're also getting a little map game going on. Alright, and what was mapped out. We're also digging on kingdoms and provinces of Anian. We're also talking about Forgotten Kingdom of Anian, which is your natural kingdom of trees. Alright. I'm talking about Cherokees and Creek. I'm talking about Itza Maya, priest kings and great khans. Alright, so this right here, this is where the Cherokee starts to come in on these maps. Cherokee, alright. The clarity on this is amazing. Look at the Chiaha. Alright, so this is Chiaha, or Kiaha, and keep in mind that this was a province, a kingdom. Alright. Says this is the only map which mentions the Cherokee but still names the Tennessee River. The river of the Caskanopos. This comment suggests that the Caskanopos occupied many towns and villages along the upper Tennessee. Alright. So yeah, this is part 2. And we're still building on this kingdom, on this lost kingdom. Alright. Since there were upper Creeks in the eastern Tennessee and northeastern Alabama who spoke dialects of what English speakers call Coasati. Now we're still talking about Itza Maya. You'll see why. Alright. It says river of the ancient. I don't know, you're gonna have to dig on that. Formerly inhabited by. We're gonna have to dig on this. Alright. I have to dig on that. See what that's talking about. These are large villages of the Cherokee. Alright, so we just getting our little map game on right about now. Says 6 years later, Senex went back to calling the Tennessee River the Caskanopo. This is an English map, but Senex kept the French spellings for most rivers and tribes. Okay. So he said he named the Tennessee the Ho'ogi or the Uchi or Kalimako. Kalimako, alright? Which is the Itza Maya name for river. It would primarily be named the Kalimako until the late 1780s. Alright? When the founders of the territory of Tennessee took an Anglicized version of the Muskogee Creek name of the Little Tennessee River and applied it to the main river. So it used to be called Kalimako, which was the Itza Maya version. Then they put their version of the Muskogee Creek. So keep this creek in mind, alright? And not to say that Cherokee is the official frequency, but why is this creek so pushy? So here we see the Kalimako, right, next to the Cherokee. Keep in mind, Kalimako means House of the King. We're still talking Great Khan. We're still talking Great Khan and the kingdom or province of Anian. Anian being your natural kingdom of trees. Alright, so Kalimako being the house of the king or the priest king. As we'll see, right? I mean, we're just building. It says Caskanopo. Let's get this, alright? Caskanopo was the name of an alliance of Muskogean towns and villages on the Tennessee and Little Tennessee rivers, which means many warriors. It was a descendant of the province of Cocha, visited by the Hernando de Soto expedition in 1540. They apparently spoke a dialect of the language that linguistics now call Coasati. An alternative name for this alliance is Upper Creeks. So that's why I said to keep this in mind, right? Because this is the sketchy part. Remember, the Upper Creeks were an alien tribe. That's what they refer to them as, an alien tribe. Okay, because we're dealing with Itza Maya. Itza Maya. But they replaced the Kalimako with this creek. Alright? They replaced the Kalimako with this creek. Okay? And then we're going to get... what was the alien tribe oh man. Where is it? Oh no. It is somewhere. But remember, They mentioned the Upper Creek. All right here. Of the Upper Creeks, all right, whose original inhabitants were of an alien tribe, all right, afterwards amalgamated with the Creeks. Okay, and then they just said down here, all right, that this was the language they spoke. All right, Caskanopo. So we're just digging on this. All right, hey, out to the real ones. We're gonna carry on. Peace, peace. So continuing on, we have the Tama-atlee. The Tama-atlee. All right, the Tama-atlee. Little known today outside the state of Louisiana, the Tama-atlee branch of the Creek Indians apparently had a culture with substantial Mesoamerican influences. I'm going to just say right now, I'm not sure if these is really Creek. You'll see why. You know, I think this is, I don't know, man. I don't know. I feel a little hijack energy with this Creek. It's really giving me a cringe. All right. Because I just find it weird why the so-called Creek would be adopting Mesoamerican influences if they didn't also replace them. All right. It says a branch of the Creek Indians apparently had a culture with substantial Mesoamerican influences. The Tama-atlee spoke a coastal dialect of Itzati, which is Hitchiti, which included many pure Itza, Maya, and Teutonic words. At least as late as 1763, one branch of the Tama-atlee in Tennessee used the Itza Maya word Mako as the title of their principal chief. So here, when we were building on Kali Mako as the house of the king, we can see that Mako was the title for their principal chief. All right, so we're still talking the priest king. Priest king, all right? We're still within that flow. And in that flow, we're only talking the Great Khan. Like the Maya, Tama-atlee houses contained 3 rooms. Their domestic and public buildings were plastered with white stucco made with a combination of white clay, hydrated lime, and crushed shells. Spanish and English observers stated that the Tama-atlee buildings glistened like pearls. Unlike most branches of the Creek Indians, the principal temple mounds of the Tama-atlee face south. This was also the practice of the Appalachee. So you see how we're back to the Appalachee vibe, right? So we're still within the same frequency of part 1, which is why I feel like this Creek is doing a little too much, right? This Creek frequency. The Tama-atlee farmsteads were generally dispersed across particularly fertile areas of a province. Most towns called either Ulamacos, capitals, or Tuluas, which were district centers, were located on navigable rivers. The definite pre-European contact locations of the Tama-atlee provinces, again with that word, right? Again with that word. So we're talking about kingdoms in America, in America, in India Superior, just popping off, right? The Prester way. We're just talking cometas. You know what I'm saying? Were along the upper Altamaha and lower Okmulgee river basins in what is now southeastern Georgia, plus the Valley River Basin between Murphy, North Carolina, and Andrews, North Carolina. There was a cluster of Tama-atlee villages in the Kiowa River in South Carolina in 1680s, but these Tama-atlee may have immigrated northward from southeastern Georgia in response to Spanish colonization efforts. In the 1700s, branches of the Tama-atlee joined both the Creek Confederacy and the Cherokee Alliance. The Tama-atlee clan was prominent among Georgia Creeks in the 1700s and early 1800s, but is no longer active among Creeks in Oklahoma. It says numerous references state that the Tamahita or the Tamahitans were Cherokees living in Virginia. They in fact were the most northern branch of the Osage Creeks who returned back to Georgia in the 1700s and became part of the Creek Confederacy. The actual name for themselves was Tamahiti, which is an Osage Creek word derived from the Totonic language of Mexico. The explanation can be found in the section of this article on origin of ethnic names. So we're still building with this Itza Maya flow, this Asati, but they're attaching this Creek vibration onto it. Alright? And this is somehow still connected to the Cherokee. Okay, so here we're just showing the connection, alright, between these names and the Itza Maya. Alright, like the Altamaaha, the Altamaha River, alright, most likely gets its name from the Itza Maya, alright, Itza Maya, and it would mean the place of the Tamau Lord. Alright, so, you know, all of these names are just dealing with the Itza Maya. We're building on that connection. We're showing that there's a connection to the so-called Maya people, right? And how these spots are referred to as the provinces. Right? Because we're talking about a lost kingdom or province of Anian. Alright. So, see a lot of Creek adaptation onto this flow right here. Keep in mind, though, that, you know, we're showing this connection because of its true connection that we're underlining to the Appalachee. Alright, this is really what we're building on. So, you know, we're making our way to it like we usually do. And, you know, we're going to see what else we got. Hey, hop to the real one. Alright. It says the people who today call themselves Southeastern Native American are not genetically the same humans who first observed European explorers entered their ancestors' territory in the 1500s. Waves of European plagues, wars, slave raids, forced labor, and migrations between 1500 and 1800 reduced their population by at least 95%. So they say, you know. The surviving remnants banded together in order to survive, but also intermarried with peoples from the old world. Okay, now this is that hijack. Keep in mind, all right? Keep in mind. While the Spanish Empire sought to destroy the indigenous people's culture in order to create a class of peons, British and French authorities first pushed aside the native peoples immediately in the path of colonization, then encouraged the survivors on the frontier to form super tribes, plus change from equalitarian to hierarchical societies. It was much simpler to bribe a native king in order to steal a tract of land than to bribe all the men in each village. Alright, so keep in mind it said native king, and we're building off the Callimaco, right, which is the house of the king. So here we already have a so-called native king. And I know the word king is, messing with your mental right about now. Would you prefer chief? Right? It's still the same word. Alright. It says remnants of Native American provinces were generally pushed westward and southward. There go that word again. Provinces. Right? There's that word again. Provinces were generally pushed westward and southward. The exception was the Tuscarora tribe, whose survivors fled northward to join the Iroquois Confederacy in 1715. By 1800, very few native towns were where they had been in 1700. Cultures were torn asunder. Okay, it says each wave of old world immigrants who arrived on the shores of North America assumed that the surviving indigenous peoples had been the same in the past. The great towns and public architecture of the Southeast encountered by Spanish and French explorers in the 1500s were completely forgotten by the early 1700s. By the late 1700s, tribes such as the Cherokees, Creeks, and Seminoles that didn't exist in 1700 were assumed have been in the same locations for centuries. This misconception continues to the present. Native Americans, anthropologists, and historians try to understand the past from the perspective of assimilated tribes and ethnic boundaries in the early 1800s. The Southeast before Columbus was a very different place. And this is exactly what we try to acknowledge and highlight for everybody watching and viewing, is that the Noah Webster's version of the copper-colored races today aren't really applied and viewed the same. When these Europeans came, these foreigners came, pale or melanated, they saw a lot of melanated people that no longer were represented later on throughout, the timeline. So, this site really has a point. Furthermore, we're just looking at the Maya Georgia connection. Notice that Copal, right? The priest of Appalachia. So you see how now we're back into the Appalachee. We're in the Appalachee. Maintain thousands of painted buntings in their mountain temples. Buildings glistened like gold because of the mica applied to their stucco. Mica. Alright. Let's get that back. Let's get this mica real quick. Let's get it. It says, micas are a group of silicate minerals whose outstanding physical characteristics is that individual mica crystals can easily be split into extremely thin elastic plates. Alright, so, the mica crystals, alright, this is what we're dealing with. Pyrite, gold, so this is pyrite, huh? That's intense. Wow. So you can get this actually on the site. Or at least it used to be. I'm not sure right about now, to be honest. Because a lot of my stuff has changed. But okay. So see, they're gemstones. Alright, crystals. You know, so your ancestors was building with crystals, man. So-called frequency of temples. Of crystal temples at that. It says buildings glisten like gold because of the mica applied to their stucco. So it was on shine. It was shining. You know, that's why it was the kingdom of gold. Especially since we got that in part 1, right? But this is just backing it up. Alright? So we're connecting this Appalachee to this Itza Maya. To this Cherokee. We're looking at this creek. Alright, let's blow this up. Now let's look at this. Alright. The Asati. Alright, now if I take away so-called Cherokee, then this is really what you're working with. This spot right here. And then a branching out and mixing of the such. Alright. So you have the Lenape, then you have the Algonquin, the Iroquois up here. So yeah, you remove this tribe, you remove these tribes, you remove all of these, you introduce the Creeks as they show you. They're showing you the proto-Muskogeans, right? Now notice down here we have Chichen Itza. So we'll dig on that in a different build, right? But look at what they're telling you. Look how this is all connected. Right? This is all connected. Alright? Peep this, right? Itza Maya. So it's all connected. Alright, which is why I was kind of shook to see them. Now look at the Arawat. This is what I was telling my cousin. Shout out to my cousin. Alright, because I was literally having a build with him and I was telling him that this was, look at this. I mean, from the tip of South America to the island, travel your way up the islands to the coast, you get to the coast, bang, and you getting it going. All within here. You just getting it going. Alright, and here we have Teotihuacan. And it says the real name of this great city was Tula. Several native towns in the southeast were also named Tula. Tula became the Asati word, or the so-called creek again, you know, word for town. Etowah Mounds, its original name was Itula, which means great town in both Itza Maya and Georgia Creek. Asate Itza Maya. Okay, and keep in mind we were connecting the Etowah Mounds to Levitical cities once again. Alright, so we was getting some map drop right about now. Alright. And here we're looking at just the all-around society, right? And their connections. It's mummification. The Appalachee, alright, mummified their kings. Look, the Appalachee mummified their kings. Alright. Their kings were then buried in caves along with offerings, but no human sacrifices. Alright. No human sacrifices. Here we're just still talking about the Itza Maya connection. Alright? The Tama-atlee. That's what this one says. Alright? That Maya blue. Now that's an interesting drop we'll get to next time. Maya blue. Okay, but look at all of this. Alright. Showing a connection to this drop. Okay, here it says that they called their kings Paracusa. Alright, so we're still talking about so-called chiefs and kings. Alright, we're still talking about your priest king. But we're just building on this kingdom of Anian. Right? And as you see, you know, we're digging. All right. Now here's where they're gonna try to incorporate, you know, human sacrifices and the such. We got some things that say otherwise, but notice how they say the same style wooden sword was used by the Creeks. Alright, wooden sword. So we're gonna build on that too, because there's something about this creek, man, you know. More importantly, you know, we're just building on this Appalachian. All right. Says interpretation of the track rock petroglyphs in Brasstown Bald by U.S. Forest Service. Museum exhibits and brochures related to Track Rock Gap and nearby Brasstown Bald Mountain, sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, present the region as being primarily Cherokee heritage. The only Native American tribe mentioned in the USFS Museum on Brasstown Bald is Cherokee. Georgia's indigenous people, the Creeks, who built the large ceremonial sites, towns, and mounds in Georgia, southeast Tennessee, and western North Carolina, are given the generic label mound builders by USFS. The 2001 USFS archaeological report on the Track Rock Gap site describes the petroglyphs as probably the graffiti of bored Cherokee hunters. We got that in part 1. Right? It says Brass Town is the mistranslation of the Cherokee word Itza, which means place of the Itza Maya. Alright? So, you know, it still has, you know, what they want to refer to as Mayan connections, as well as Cherokee and, you know, Creek, all that, all together, right? Shouts out to the bro. You know, every time you see it, you know what I mean? Every time you see it, you see the Drake Con, Alright, dodge all hijacks. It's fifth wave. Alright, so these are comparisons between Itza Maya terraces and Guatemala and Chiapas compared to the one in Track Rock Gap, alright, in Georgia. It says, there's a dirty little secret about Track Rock Gap that the History Channel didn't tell viewers. Late 16th century and 17th century French, Spanish, and English explorers knew about the capital town on the side of a tall mountain. The town is also described on the last page of the migration legend of the Creek people. The Spanish called it Great Copal because of the Appalachee priests burned Copal incense from their mountainside temples constantly. Now this sounds something straight out of the book. Alright, that sounds something straight out of your ancestral text right there. Alright. That's exactly what it's looking like to me. Alright. So we're going to get a little bit of this. We're going to carry on. Alright, it says in 1585, the famous English geographer Richard Hakluyt dispositioned two captive Spanish traders from St. Augustine who had formerly lived in Santa Elena, South Carolina. They had traded with the Appalachee, who were the vassals of the Itza aristocracy, which lived at Copal. Now these are the Mayans, right? The Asati Mayans, or so-called Creek. We'll see. Okay? But the Appalachians, well, you should know who they are from part 1. Okay? Because this is part 2. It says the towns to the north and south of Copal guarded the entrance of the Shangri-La-like valley where Copal was located. This is why the native guides of Hernando de Soto led the conquistadors in a long loop north of the heart of Georgia's mountains, even though Coosa or Cocha was 50 miles due west of Copal. Juan Pardo planned to take the road to Coosa that would gone straight through the Track Rock Gap. He had to turn around when tipped off that soldiers from several native provinces planned to ambush his company of soldiers. Most Spanish traders were forbidden access to the capital. Many of those who tried were killed. Their armor has been found near US 19 between Da La Nega and Blood Mountain. After Great Britain defeated France in the 7 Years' War, her historians and politicians erased the memory of the Jewish, Spanish, Moorish, French, and Dutch settlers who had colonized the Appalachians beginning in the late 1500s. Now, what are we talking about? It says that all 3 of these, or 5 really, alright, settlers. I mean, but when you really look at it, they're all the same, right? Because in their original state, they all fall under some sort of more. Alright? And, you know, they want to say, oh yeah, well, these Jewish people came over here, but technically you were already here. Alright? You were already here. I mean, we talk about it all the time, right? These settlers actually being melanated. So here we can see the connection, especially around this date. Alright? Around this date, everybody's melanated. Everybody's melanated. Everybody's melanated at this point. Alright, who had colonized the southern Appalachians beginning in the late 1500s. The Spanish in Florida had even built a road to the Appalachee in 1646 and established a fortified trading post in the Nucochi Valley, according to the 17th century French ethnographer Charles de Rochefort. 6 survivors of the Fort Caroline massacre settled near Copal. A Sephardic gold mining village thrived near there until the Queen Anne's War. Erasing their memory also meant erasing the memory of the Kingdom of Appalachia, which was described by 16th and 17th century visitors to the region. Copal, the capital of the Asati Creek-speaking Appalachee, once ruled a vast territory of Proto-Creek provinces in northern Georgia, western North Carolina, and eastern Tennessee. The name of the mountain Appalachee disappeared from maps between 1700 and 1717, which gives me Psalms 83 vibes. Real life, right? Especially when we're digging on what Appalachee actually means. So, you know, they erased the memory of the Kingdom of Appalachia. Alright? And notice how they're saying that the ones that got erased were these right here, along with the Kingdom of the Appalachia. So let that just sit in your mental real quick. Just real quick, because we're not playing with y'all. Right? Like I said, there's a lot of brothers out here that like to connect what happened over there in Europe with our melanated cousins and brothers and sisters, along with the aboriginals over here. And I'm showing you the connection in real time. Dealing with this Itza Maya. We're talking about the Kingdom of the Appalachee. Alright, which is now starting to sound like this Kingdom of Anian. Right? They said that it was lost. They said that this kingdom was lost. Alright, the origin of the name of Anian being nature. A nature kingdom, a natural kingdom of trees. Alright, we've been digging on this Calimako, house of the king. Calimako, house of the king, right? Which is the Great Khan. which is the Great Khan. All right. Mako as the principal chief, Appalachian Indians. All right, now we're just talking about this kingdom of Appalachia. All right. And they're saying that this kingdom just disappeared, which is probably why they refer to it as lost. All right, and there's reason for it. There's definite reason for it. I mean, this is some drip drop. You know? We're going to continue. Peace to the real ones. Alright, so here we have in the kingdom of the Appalachee. Alright. Just to show you we not playing around. Now, keep in mind, we're going to dodge all hijacks, but also pay attention to how they introduce this shit. Right? It says the 1600s brought an almost unbelievable degree of admixture and population change to the southern highlands. In fact, little of what demonstrably occurred has been believed. Hang on to your colonial cap because it's going to be a bumpy ride. And I mean, for real, y'all, it's about to get crazy. Alright, it's really about to get crazy. So here we see this is the Appalachee capital. Alright, and this is how they say it looked. Alright. Alright. It says a link between the English colonists who disappeared in 1590 and the new demography of the following century is Virginia Dare. Did the first white child born in Virginia perish sometime between her birth on August 18th, 1587, followed a few weeks later by her grandfather John White sailing for England and his landing on a deserted Roanoke Island on August 16, 1590 on his return? Or did she live on as one of the survivors of the lost colony? Most historians favor the first alternative. Some imagine she died as a baby with a tomahawk embedded in her skull. That's a bit much, alright? It's a bit much. We're gonna see what this is about. We're gonna see what this is about. All right, so here in this article, they basically try to explain by way of hijack, like always, that somehow what we refer to as the pale white skin, white skinned people of today became natives, which wouldn't be wrong in the sense of the word native, right? But here we're trying to mark the impression on indigenous, right? Being aboriginals, being Indians, and this is what they're creeping into along with everything else. So this goes to show how they're not just claiming that they're Jewish, Moorish, and Europeans. They're even claiming that they're Indians. They claim that they're everything to move you and marginalize you out of whatever script, narrative, picture that does not matter. Alright, so all this back and forth, it's pointless. Alright. What are we looking for exactly? So here we have, well, this is interesting to me, right? Because shout out to my cousin, but this is right up his alley, right? We was just talking about the traveling of genetics, and this is right up his alley right here, because this is basically what he's learning. His roots is tied into on his father's side, along with some European mixtures of the original stock. We're talking about the black royalty, so-called black royalty, So when we're digging on this Englishman, was Richard Brigstock, or Brigstock of Barbados, who supplied Richfort with an eyewitness report based on his sojourn to the kingdom of the Appalachee around 1653. Alright. It says chapter 7 is on the origin of the Carib Indians called Caribbees, by way of digression giving an account of the Appalachites or Appalachee Indians. So, here go a little biblical connotation, right? Appalachites. Just like so-called Israelites. You know what I'm saying? Just like any other ites when it's referring to the so-called ancient peoples. Okay? It's asking a classical new world utopia, a fanciful empire, are typical verdicts pronounced upon it. Were the Appalachites a fanciful flourish, a mythical native kingdom in the southeastern part of North America, or were they real? So when we were digging on this joint, right, it was kind of saying something similar, right? In another world, or in other words, potentially in a new world. This was on the other side, a new world, right? And an amazing world that basically was on the other side. That's what this was referring to. A mythical native land. All right. And based off of what we was getting, they were using microcrystals, and a lot of these foreigners mistaken it for gold. Thought this was the spot for gold. All right, but you can see how we're talking about the Appalachies. Okay? The Appalachies. Now, here it says the men in these countries are for the most part of high stature, of an olive color and well proportioned, their hair black and long. Both men and women are very neat and curious in keeping their hair clean and handsomely ordered. All right. The women tie up theirs, as far as their hair, about the crown of the head after the form of a garland, and the men dispose theirs behind their ears. The Appalachites are for the most part of a great height, of olive color and well proportioned body. They are all born perfectly white, but they change the natural color of their skin by frequent use of a certain ointment that they create with bear grease and the root of an herb that has the virtue of inuring them against the heat and cold. Alright, yeah, that's very interesting. You know what I'm saying? Because that just sounds like a bunch of melanin to me. Alright? It sounds like a bunch of melanin to me. Now, let's look at that, right? Let's get it real quick. Let's get that. Hey, so since they brought up skin types on their own, right? Notice the description they chose to use, which was olive, and what number it falls under in the spectrum. Rarely burns, always tans. Okay, olive. They chose the term olive. Right? I mean, let's blow it up. Right. So they said the Appalachians look like this. Alright, without a doubt. And then we know the copper color races is the whole spectrum. You know, we can go the whole spectrum. Alright. The whole spectrum. Alright. So that was their turn. You know. Just to show you, you know, we serious. Now let's look at the one that they chose, right? It says warm is great for those individuals in between a medium and tan complexion. Excellent for those slightly lighter Latina, Mediterranean, and East Indian colorations. Again, Latina, you know, for all you guys that, you know, identify with these terms without really understanding what they're used for. You know, now this is a generally safe term, but it's literally the next shade from these two. Alright, but look at the features in this woman right here. This young aqua, right? And then look at this one, tan, right? Tan is great if you have warmer to what? More olive undertones. Warmer to more olive. Why would they say more olive if they're getting away from the Mediterranean? Now, normally they use olive to refer to folks of the Mediterranean. Now, notice that. Let's pay attention to that. Mediterranean. Because of who we're so-called digging on with attaching frequency. Okay? I told you to be paying attention to a specific peoples. Now, they're talking about an olive color, right? But an olive is normally what you use to describe Mediterranean people. So tan is great if you have warmer to more olive undertones with exotic colorations that tan easily. Ideal for that darker than average skin colors. Excellent for those slightly darker Latina, Mediterranean, and East Indian colorations. Alright. Olive skin tone. Alright. And then you got deep. Alright. So this is what we're building on right now. And they're talking about how they looked, right? This olive color. So now that we got that out the way, let's continue this build. It is apparent that Rochefort's book only became more accurate and authentic with the last edition. There seems never to have been a large element of fantasy or polemics or anything like a cavalier approach as claimed by American anthropologists who dismissed the work. In Appendix D, we have translated some of the passages that significantly improve upon the English excerpts familiar to most readers. Included are paragraphs on the Appalachies' origins, unusual birds in their country, clothing, religion, and government. And right up under that, what do we have? Greek, not Creek. Greek, not Creek. I cannot make this up. Greek and not Creek. Alright? Greek and not Creek. I mean, we cannot make this up. I told you this was tribal. And now you see what I meant. Right? Because this is an inner tribal thing that we got. That the Creeks are not really Greeks, and that the Greeks are really not Creeks, or that the Creeks are the Greeks and the Creeks are Greeks. Greeks are Creeks. Creeks, Greeks. They're interchangeable. This has been a back and forth, you know what I'm saying? And now we're getting it, right here, live and direct. It says the Appalachians had little to do apparently with the Cherokees, though they experienced similar admixture events and were long neighbors. They kind of basically almost, as we'll see right now, right? At one time, it seems that the Appalachee received tribute from the Cherokee. One can read about them in the many works of the Creek historian Robert Thornton online and in print. Since this is a book about Cherokee ancestry, we will only touch on some general similarities. The first common denominator that strikes us is language. Since the 18th century, the Appalachee have been confused with and overshadowed by the Appalachicola of the Spanish missions around present-day Tallahassee. The latter have left us few specimens that might throw some light on the Appalachian language, but little is proved by them. Richford or his editor Lamnitz, the subject could not be addressed in the edition of 1681. We would have added at the conclusion of this article a small essay on their language in order to give a taste of it to the curious, but aside from the fact that the pronunciation of the native speakers gives it a sweetness and gracefulness that our letters and spelling can hardly capture, one of the directors of the colony, De La Palme, working at the moment we write this to establish the correspondence and great similitude that exists between the majority of the languages of the peoples of America and those of the Tartars and certain Arabs of Asia, relieves us most happily of that entire task. All right. All right. So look, let's tap into this. All right. It says, yet, despite these challenges, it is possible to get a glimpse of the original language. There are a few securely documented Appalachee words preserved and place names and proper nouns in Rutherford's account. Consistently, they seem to be cognate with Old World languages, not those of the New World as spoken either by Caribs or Creek Indians. As we have seen, Rafinske or Squay believe that the first Indian nations came from the Caribbean. Before that, the Canaries and Iberian Peninsula. Now, that's crazy how we got the Canaries just in the last drop, right? And we talking about the dog-headed island. So pay attention to what they're really saying, because here goes the hijack, right? It's these dog-headed people. He just said he believes that the first Indians come from the nations, the first Indian nations come from the Caribbean, and before that, from the Canaries and the Iberian Peninsula. Keep that in mind, all right? Also keep in mind that they said these Appalachians, right, had the domain, look, the domain of the Appalachies, okay, the domain of the Appalachies. But they said that these Appalachies were of an olive skin tone. All right. Right here, right? Of olive color. Of olive color. Right? Olive color. Of olive color. The I don't know why I can't say this right now. Appalachites. Alright? Appalachites. So they're talking about olive color. Now I told you that olive is normally used to describe Mediterranean people. And notice how they're saying Greek and not Creek. Greek is in the Mediterranean. So you see why they were using that olive, tint to try to escape. But we're not going to let them escape because we got their ass, right? By their words. Now, I know a lot of people get upset and they tend to, scoff at the different articles that I choose. But I choose these articles because these people put in their own terms the words that they choose to use. And when you surf the waves like we do right here at 432, we catch them slipping in their own paint. And we just put it on display. And we whoop right through that hijack. We see right through it. With these Dragon eyes, right? With these Dragon eyes. It says, thus he compared the Haitian Taino. And I was just telling my cousin that these two were basically one and the same. Right? That they were basically one and the same. Same thing with the so-called Jamaicans and Mayan. But we'll touch on that on a different time. But Haitian Taino language to what he called a pelagic, right? A pelagic Greek language spoken around the Mediterranean basin by the ancestors of the Greeks and Italians. Modern linguistics call it Pelasgians. Now, this connects us right back to the Canaanite drop. Because I've been telling y'all about these Pelasgians. Now, they're saying that these Creeks are really Pelasgians. They're saying that these, look, it says modern day linguistics call it Pelasgian, a language spread by sea. Rafinescus, or whatever his name would be, found nearly 200 comparable words, whereof about 160 offer more or less analogies, mutually affinity 80% complete and near connection. He concluded that the Haitians or Tainos were of Pelasgian or Mediterranean origin. The closest languages after Proto-Greek were the Atlantic, Iberian, Libyan, Egyptian, Basque, Sanskrit, Persian, which were all connected with the Pelagic nations. His tabulation showed that Taino-Pelasgian affinities were, of course, the greatest of the Arawak nations of South America, who are their brothers and extend to the Taos of the Tucuman or the Tinguis or the true Patagons of Pigafetta. Furthermore, he observed that the nearest affinities after these were the Appalachies, Natchez, Codas, Huastecas, Mexican, Tarasca, Maya, Chantal of North America, and the Darien, Batoy, and Peruvian Chile. All of these are Negro tribes, man. All of these are Negro tribes. The converse was also true. There was little overlap with Asiatic type languages like those in the Algonquin macro-linguistic family. The Pelasgians was the litmus test for American languages of Eastern or Atlantic origin. Alright, and this is how they try to explain the interrelation between Greek and Creek and Bang. Alright? It says, look in the name, right? Paracosa, or Paracos. I think this word is pure Greek. Paracousa, a particle of parakio, to excel, meaning surpassing, non-paro or parallel, without rival. This literal meaning explains why it is applied to the resident king or supreme chief of a province, especially a supreme ruler in Melilla, to which the others pay court, as well as to a rare bird described at length, obviously the golden crowned kinglet or gold crest, which the peoples of Europe and other places around the world recognize as the king of the bird kingdom. Richard Thornton says the Appalachee word means sea elite, but this is vague, not literal explanation. It may be a calque or translation rather than an etymology based on roots. He makes the first element the same as panon, par as in water, as in Peru, rather than a prepositional prefix para. This strikes me as akin to deriving a Latin word from French. French came after Latin, just as the Creek Indians followed the Appalachian Indians in point of chronology. So that's my point. These Creek Indians were following the Appalachee, and the Appalachee is the roots. Alright, and furthermore, these Pelasgians, like I've been saying in these Canaanite drops, have been those who were before the moon. So we're talking about a for sure melanated people. You know what I'm saying? They said olive, and we got the tone on olive. We got the build on olive right here. We got the tone on olive, the build. right? So we got the build on it. We got the drop. Olive. So we know we're talking about melanated people when they say Pelasgians or the Pelasgians as the Proto-Greeks. As soon as they said that, I caught them slipping in their paint. The ancestors of the Greeks, a pre-Greek language, pre-Greek, pre-Creek, pre-Creek, a Proto-Creek, Proto-Creek, Greek. All right? And this is what I was telling my cousin. Like, literally, we was just literally having this conversation. Like, literally just having this conversation. Oh, man. You know? And to get that Appalachian, it means on the other side. Other side of the river, like that of Anian. On the other side. Anian. On the other side. Appalachian. You know, we're just talking your priest kings, man. You know, we just talking your priest king. We still talking Hebrew. Alright, we're building on the Appalachies. Okay, because we just talking Indians, man. Copper color races. Alright, Appalachee society was well organized and ruled by chiefs, the Olatas, who inherited their positions and were guided by priests. Okay? It says the Appalachee built large villages that included earthen platform mounds and plazas where religious and cultural ceremonies were conducted. They participated in a far-reaching trading network that brought them things made or gathered by other Native Americans beyond Appalachee province. The metal copper is one example. And we already got that drop on the Instagram, right, where we showed how it was actually this Appalachee province that were the first to do metallurgy. The first in the world to do metallurgy right here. An Appalachee family placed more importance on the mother's relatives than the father's kin, as was usually the custom in Europe. Native clans or extended families took names of animals, bear, deer, snakes, and other natural forces. Wind clan, for example. When an Appalachee man married, he resided with his wife's clan. Appalachee chiefs traced their inherited positions of power through their female relatives. When a chief died, his oldest sister's oldest son inherited the position of chief. This custom granted more cultural status to the Appalachee women than European women. Alright? Says the Appalachee chiefs governed villages and nearby forests. So we're just building on the Appalachian chiefs, right? Because we're showing how they have their priest kings, right? We're showing how the priest and the king work together. Appalachee society was well organized and ruled by chiefs who inherited positions and were guided by priests. Alright? Stop playing with us, man. You know, we going after them. Alright, here we have the Indian landscape of the Florida from the book First Americans, A History of Native Peoples Combined, a volume, and I don't know the rest of it. Alright. But it says 3 large native groups shaped the Florida's borderlands. The Tama-atlee, which I would think that would be right. The Tama-atlee chiefdoms occupied portions of central and north Florida. Guale Indians lived along coastal Georgia. Finally, the Appalachee native peoples had villages in the northwest panhandle of Florida and portions of southwest Georgia. Where's all this Greek talk? Where's all this Greek talk? All I hear is Appalachies. It says the Tama-atlee chiefdoms of the 17th century were composed of a number of chiefs and villages united under the leadership of one superior chief. Chiefs were known as olatas, but the Spanish applied the generic title of cacique. Alright, the olatas inherit their right to rule through their mother's line, and if a man was unavailable to lead, women became chiefs or caciques. Alright. It says, archaeological evidence and early Spanish documents revealed that the Tama-atlee lived in villages ringed with defensive stakes and containing as many as 400 residents. At the center of each village was the chief's council house. Villagers frequent the council house to offer gifts and perform rituals and ceremonies to show their spiritual loyalty to specific olatas as well as other village elders. Alright, so this chiefdom and priesthood work hand in hand. Alright, this joint work hand in hand. Alright. And here it goes again. The Miko. Or the Miko. So this is like the Mika that we was looking at. Alright. So, you know, we're just doing these builds, man, and we're tying up this kingdom, connecting it back to the Itza Maya, to the Mayan, to the Appalachians. You know what I'm saying? To this Anian, to the priest king, man. You know, this is the Papavu. You know, this is what the Quiches wrote about themselves. We only come here we're looking for something very specific. Trying to see if I see it before. Thought I saw it. maybe not. Hope everyone's doing well out there. You know, this has just been a wonderful build. You know, whenever we're dealing with India Superior in real time, right? And we're able to connect it. It's like Itza right here, right? Looks like Itza right there. I mean, we're just connecting it to what we've been building on, right? Because we're talking about Mayans and such. I'm looking for this particular wording. I seen it earlier, but I've been going at it like for a couple of hours straight, so I'm not necessarily looking at what I was a couple of hours ago. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, if I don't find it, then you would have to forgive me. But it's here. I mean, here it has shaman priest, but they have like king priest, basically. And that's what I was trying to find. And I still kind of want to find it. Let me see, I'm scroll down. And if it's not here, then, you know, I'll go ahead and jump on to the next. But this was the main reason I opened this document. But the way I'm scanning over this, I don't think I'm gonna catch it the way I wanted to. Oh yeah, it's down here. Okay, so perfect. It says non-Mayan priest ruler. Non-Mayan priest ruler. Alright. My whole point though is to get you to pay attention to this. Maya priest ruler. Alright, because this is your priest king. That is your great Khan. Alright, that is your great Khan. That will be building on. Alright, is your great Khan. So even in the Popol Vuh, you know, they're talking about such a thing, you know what I'm saying? And it's amazing. You know, I got a couple more tabs up here, but I want to get into something else more so than that. Try and make sure I got the right one before I do. Alright, so here we have the Americas Revealed. And here, they're talking about syphilis, right? And how when they brought syphilis over here along with these other pathogens, sort of like what they do today. Same thing, right? With these viruses and vaccinations, they just wipe you out. It's still the same thing that they was doing way back then. Alright? So with this one, they're talking about the kingdom of the Appalachia. You see it? It says it was the progenitor of the Creek Confederacy. and it began allowing Protestant and Jewish colonists to settle on this land in 1566. All right. Kingdom. It says in 1653, the Paracusa, the High King of the Appalachian Kingdom, whose capital was the Northeast Georgia, was in Northeast Georgia. All right. He had no fear of the European invaders. All right. No fear. So we're talking about the High King, the Paracusa, the High King. We're still talking about the Great Khan, priest ruler. Right? The Maya priest ruler. We're talking about Prester, man. We getting our Prester on right about now. You know what I'm saying? We just posted up with the real ones. We just talking Appalachian Kingdom. You know? And digging on this drop, we're going to be leading to the connection once again, because notice how they were saying that the Creek were the Greek. Well, I found some drop that was very interesting. All right. But notice how this word is basically the same. The Paracus, people of Peru. All right. The Paracusa, which is the same name for High King, right? Paracusa. Now we're digging on the Paracus people. Now they're saying the Paracus people of Peru, who built the Fieldstones effigies on the Nazca Plain, are really Caucasians, like they said about the Creek being Greek. Alright, so this is what these people do, man. Red-haired giants and shit. Okay? The red-haired Caucasians were called Chacapoya, or Cacapoya. Okay? It says this information is directly relevant to the Muskogeans. If you recall, the original name of the elite families of the Proto-Creek was Paracusati, which means the Paracus people. The High Kings were up to 7 feet tall over the Paracusas, and the Cacapoyas were not true giants, but averaged about the height of the Creek people today. Alright, so here they go again, but they're hijacking into the Creek. They're trying to hijack with the Creek, and they're saying that these red-haired giants were indigenous people of New Zealand. Alright? Which were basically their ancestors for Indo-European Caucasian people. So they're trying to connect themselves to the Muskogean Creek, which is in turn they're adapting to this Itza Maya flow and attaching themselves to that as well, which is why I'm digging on this to show you how I felt about this Creek thing. Right? It really made me feel some kind of way, because I'm digging on this Creek thing and I'm like, wow. And then I'm seeing them trying to influence their way into the Creek by way of Greek, just for us to learn that they're really coming from the Pelasgians. And the Pelasgians were those who were here before the moon. So you know we're only talking about your melanated ancestors. Alright? I got a couple of tabs. If we do a part 3, I'll say those up for. I want to get says maps drawn in France during the last third of the 17th century and early displayed Pays du Kufashate in present-day northeast Georgia, north-central Georgia, in the adjacent region around Franklin. All right, so this is what we were already digging on. It says, but Pay means country or nation in English, but you never heard of them unless you've heard of the Appalachian Chronicles. So here there's talking about how these other Creek loanwords were found as landscape for former names of Cherokees, and they're back talking about how this Cherokee is not really Creek and Creek is not really Cherokee, and so on and so on, right? Now they're saying that Kofa and Creek means scrambled, mixed, or in a circular pattern, or even mixed people. Okay, so the Kofa Kui is the Europeanization of the Muskogee Creek word, which is Kofaki, which means mixed people. So Kofashi is the Europeanization of the Isate Appalachee Creek word Kofasi, pronounced Kofash, whatever, right? The equivalent Muskogee Creek word, literally it means scrambled descendants of. Alright, so here they're talking about it means mixed race. This Creek means mixed race of people. These descendants, these Creek Indians, alright, who were from an alien tribe that we got, this Upper Creek. Alright? And I found that to be kind of crazy if this is the case, because this is really how they started to water everything down, and this is how they got their way. The tribal name Kofachi appears on many French maps and some English maps in the late 1600s. It is always placed north of the real Appalachia in present-day northeast Georgia and extends into the region of North Carolina mountains, roughly bounded by the city towns of Murphy, Franklin, Asheville, Hendersonville, Bedford, and Saluda. And this is why everybody's always talking about so-called hillbillies in the Appalachian Mountains. This is where they came from, through these creeks, these Greeks that infiltrated. Alright? And this is where they became a tribe. Literally. Right here. This is literally how the Greek became the Creek. When English planter Richard Brigstock spent most of 1653 as a guest of the Parakusati, which is the High King of the Kingdom of Appalachia, he reported that the region around present-day Macomb, Georgia, northward to present-day Atlanta, was the province of Bamaran. Alright? So, we're showing that how the Creek became Greek. But we're also building on that lost kingdom of Anian, right? Which is the Appalachians. It says holy places where no blood could be shed. The evidence is accumulating that many pre-Columbian refugees came to southeastern North America to escape religious and political oppression, in addition to the volcanoes and droughts. What? Right? The volcanoes and droughts? What are we talking about? Right? The volcanoes and droughts. The monotheistic religion of the Appalachian Kingdom was the antithesis of the bloodthirsty regimes that then dominated Mesoamerica and the Andes. Alright? It says no human or animal blood could be shed within approximately 2 miles of an Appalachee temple, whether it was on a mountaintop or in a floodplain. So these people of the Appalachee tribes or kingdom did not allow any sacrifice, human nor animal, which should be telling you a lot right now. It says, for those who are visiting the People of One Fire website for the first time, we will explain who the Appalachee were. The Appalachee of northern Florida were given that name by the Spanish. They called themselves the Tula Halawasi, offspring of the highland towns. They originated as a colony of the true Appalachee, whose mother province was in the upper Piedmont and lower mountains of Georgia. For several hundred years, the Appalachee were vassals of the Asate, the Itza Maya immigrants who lived in the higher mountains of Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, and western North Carolina. The Appalachee rose to dominance around 1350 AD, and archaeologists called their time of culture dominance the Lamar culture. Alright, it says at the peak of power, the Appalachee controlled a polyglot region that stretched from southwestern Virginia to Appalachicola River in Florida. However, by 1653, the Parakusati, which is the High King of Appalachia, functioned something like the Pope and did not directly rule other provinces. All right, which is interesting because you keep seeing these shadows and duplications, as our brother Yosef would be saying right about now, right? And we're going to go ahead and build on this Lamar culture if there is a part 3, but I want to go ahead and touch on something that I found interesting. You know what I'm saying? They said they escaped oppression in addition to the volcanoes and droughts, right? And that struck me for a curve, because I'm digging on this one, right? The Itza Mayas of Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia. And it says, there is no doubt about it, the southeastern ceremonial mound culture originated near Lake Okeechobee, Florida, and Okmulgee Bottoms, Georgia, and the Nacoochee Valley of Georgia, long before the construction of mounds at Cahokia, Illinois. It was a direct result of Itza and Chantal Maya commoners immigrating to southeastern North America in large numbers and mixing with earlier Panoan mound builders who arrived around 1200 AD from eastern Peru, and Yuchi mound builders from across the Atlantic who arrived much earlier. Mexican anthropologists has always wondered what happened to the Itzas when a massive volcano eruption depopulated Chiapas. So I'm like, wait, huh? All right, a volcano eruption, right? And here we have, more of the connection. Of the Itza people. It says, before discussing the origins and history of the Itza people in Mesoamerica in part 63, we will look at the profound evidence, even the Creek migration legends, that there were 4 waves of Maya commoner refugees which settled in North America and southeastern North America. The approximate dates of these migrations were from 538 to 600 AD, with multiple volcanic eruptions in Central America, Iceland, and Indonesia caused a collapse of Teotihuacan and temporary collapse of the Maya civilization. 800 AD, when the eruption of El Chicon supervolcano incinerated much of Chiapas. 990 AD, when Toltec invaders emptied the suburbs of Chichen Itza. Alright, but we want to stick to these volcanic eruptions. So that's one thing I was never really sure of. They talk about a so-called disappearance, and it was due to these eruptions. And it has something to do with earthquakes and memory forgottens as well. Alright, because peep the dates, right? They're saying these volcanoes are popping off, which led to the collapse of Teotihuacan and the Maya civilization. Right? These volcanoes. And when I dig into this next tab, and let's look what it says. It says 6th century misery tied to not one but 2 volcanic eruptions. The ancient event is just one of among 100 times volcanoes have affected climate over the past 2,500 years. I'm losing my mind. Look, it's the same date in the summer of AD 536. It's the same date. 538. We 2 years off. 538. Okay. 536. 538. Everything we've been learning about the so-called Greek. Right? Creek. Look at where they start us off with. In the summer of AD 536, a mysterious cloud appeared over the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean basin. The sun gave forth its light without brightness, wrote the Byzantine historian, and it seemed exceedingly like the sun in an eclipse, for the beams it shed were not clear. In the wake of the cloud's appearance, local climate cooled for more than a decade. Crops failed, and there was widespread famine. A pandemic known as the Plague of Justinian swept through the Eastern Roman Empire. Look at this. Scientists had long suspected that the cause of all this misery might be a volcanic eruption, probably from Lalapango in El Salvador, which filled Earth's atmosphere with ash. But now researchers say that there were 2 eruptions, one in 535 or 536 in the northern hemisphere and another in 539 or 540 in the tropics, that kept temperatures in the north cool until 550. We cannot make this up. And it said that it collapsed the Mayan civilization, along with Iceland, Indonesia, and all that. And it is here, Mashabata, we will pick up in the next installment. I hope this has been a beautiful journey for you. Ahab to all my real ones. And sorry to cut it short right about now, but we were about to have to. So, if you found this one to be useful, please go ahead and hit up the Cash App link in the description box. That way we can go ahead and push more for these drops in the Patreon. We can get that payment to Vimeo up. Hey, how to all the real ones, don't forget to, become a dragon on the wall over here at 432drop.com and to be a sponsor. You know what I'm saying? We got many packages. You know what I'm saying? Check us out. Hey, how to the Itza squad. Till next time.